All right, so what we're going to be looking at in today's lesson is we're going to be looking at some of the roots of power and legitimacy that kind of goes along with how people rule governments. All right, so when we look at power and legitimacy, power is the ability to get people or groups to do things that they otherwise would not do, paying taxes being one of those, following certain types of laws. So if you have power, if you can get these people to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do on their own, that means you've got power. And we've talked about it, a little bit before. There's a difference between coercive power and non-coercive power. If you actually have to physically go and make people do things, then you're doing so coercively. If you've got to use the military, if you've got to use the police and things like that. But most of the time, if you look at within a society that people pay taxes because they know it's the right thing to do in order to help benefit the society. They know that there are punishments and things like that that exist if they don't do those things. But there's nobody sitting there at their doorstep that is forcing them to actually pay those taxes. Nobody's physically going into their home to take that money from them. So there's that difference between coercive power and non-coercive power. All right, so in order to wield power, one must have some form of legitimacy, and we're going to look at different types of legitimacy here in just a second. All right, legitimacy is the right to rule as determined by their own citizens. So there are different types of legitimacy, and you have to have at least one form of this legitimacy in order to rule a people. All right, so if we look at it, we've got a few different ways. First, we've got traditional legitimacy. Traditional legitimacy rests upon the belief that tradition should determine who should rule and how they should rule. So monarchies, religion, tribal concepts, all of those things are in that traditional concept, and that you pass that type of rule from one generation to the next because that's the way it is and that's the way it's always been. Then you've got charismatic legitimacy. Charismatic legitimacy is based upon the dynamic personality of an individual leader or a small group. This type of legitimacy is notoriously short-lived because it usually does not survive its founder. So if a whole bunch of people start to, if you have a regime change and everybody is, focusing on one person and they really like that person, and then all of a sudden that person either dies or falls out of favor, then a lot of times you have a very quick revolution and then somebody else takes the place of that leader. All right, so that charismatic legitimacy only lasts really for that one generation, and it doesn't move past that. All right, and then we have rational legal legitimacy. Rational legal legitimacy is based on a system of well-established laws and procedures. It is therefore anchored in strong institutions that carry on for generations. So even though we've got this generational concept like we see with traditional legitimacy, it's based upon law. It's not just based upon that tradition. All right. Rational legal legitimacy is often based upon the acceptance of the rule of law, which we talked about previously, or the idea that everyone must follow the law. So a lot of places, when we look at this rational legal legitimacy concept, they're going to root that legitimacy in a constitution. They're going to root that in laws. And when we look at that type of law of where that can be rooted, we've got two different concepts we can look at. We can look at common law and we can look at code law. Common law is based on tradition, past practices, and legal precedents. So we're going to look at these in different concepts and stuff like that. But common law isn't where you look at an actual law that's been written down. So it would be like if we look at the traditional concept. If something gets established within a court case, and then court case after court case after court case continues to look at that original case in order to make their decision, then you've got the concept of tradition. Past practices, this is the way we've done it, this is the way we've always done it, or legal precedent. I know that we gave you a 10-year sentence for this, and that person a 10-year sentence for the same thing, so if we give you a 10-year sentence, then it falls in line with what's taken place before. And then you've got code law. Code law is based upon a comprehensive system of written rules of law divided into different codes. That means if we look at that concept, that you legitimately write down the law and then everybody follows that law because it's written down. All right. The concept of legitimacy can also influence the legitimacy of the state, the economic well-being, the historical traditional longevity. So if we look at, like we said, that concept of charismatic, there's definitely not much longevity to that. Charismatic leadership, national shared political culture, satisfaction within the government's performance and responsiveness. Now, all of these things can change depending on the type of legitimacy that the government has been founded on. All right, and then we've got political culture. Political culture refers to the collection of political beliefs, values, practices, and institutions that the government is based upon. If a society values individualism, the government will reflect this value. Okay, so this is kind of how the people push these concepts towards the top of the government and to be able to towards change and things like that. So that political culture is going to have a huge impact on that. Political culture can often be measured by social capital. The higher the social capital, the higher the trust exists between citizens and government. So when we look at capital, capital is its potential. It's the potential to be able to get something done. So that social concepts, those social skills, it's the potential to be able to get things done in a social concept. So the higher the trust exists between citizens and the government, the more that they can trust each other that the citizens are going to provide good feedback and that the government is going to provide good output, then there's going to be a lot more progress within that society. All right. And so we can look at types of political culture. We've got consensual political culture and conflictual political culture. Consensual political culture generally exists when people accept both the legitimacy of the regime and its solutions to its major problems. So you say that the government institutions are good, you don't want to overthrow the government, you don't want to get rid of there, and in the vast majority of the times that they come up with a program in order to solve major problems, the vast majority of people are on board with that. This trust persists even in cases when the people do not agree with the decisions being made, and we can see that even within our own government today. That there are lots of times where the people don't necessarily agree with what's happening within the government, but yet we're not on the verge of trying to overthrow the government or anything like that. So there's definitely that consensual political culture. And then there's conflictual political culture. And this is when citizens in a conflictual political culture are sharply divided regarding the legitimacy of the regime and the solutions the regime offers to fix major problems. So in these instances, a lot of times people are, they may want to revolt, they may want to get rid of the entire government. So generally, conflictual political culture leads to very unstable societies. All right, and then we can look at political ideologies. Political ideologies are sets of political values held by individuals regarding the basic goals of government and politics. And we've got a few main ones that we're going to look at that we need to understand as we move throughout the year. The first one we're going to look at here is liberalism. Liberalism is the ideology that places emphasis on individual political and economic freedom. Liberals seek to maximize freedom for all people, including free speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of association. Now, the thing that we have to understand here when we use this concept of liberalism is that we're not using it in the same context that you would in American politics, where you've got liberals and conservatives. All right. In the United States, we have a very liberal concept when you look at it on the political spectrum of the world. We maximize freedom for all people. You look at it in the Declaration of Independence. You look at voting laws. You look at all these things. We don't want to alienate or exclude people. Everyone in our country gets free speech. Everyone in our country gets freedom of religion, and everyone gets freedom of association. You can associate with the people that you want to. All right. Then we've got communism. Communism is the ideology that values equality over freedom. All right, so in this we have government-dictated equality. And rather than, like, say, in the United States where we value the concept of equal opportunity, in communism they value equal outcome. All right, so communists believe in equality of outcome, not just equality of opportunity. All right, then we've got socialism. Socialism also values the concept of equality and feels that the government should be very, very strongly involved in trying to get that equality, but they also allow for social freedoms, freedom of speech, free market, private ownership, things like that. But they do feel that the government should have a much more involved take in trying to make sure that equality exists within the society. And then we have fascism. Fascism is the ideology that accepts the idea that people and groups exist in degrees of inferiority and superiority. So this concept very much strongly relies on the idea that there are haves and there are have-nots, and that's the way it should be, and that's the way it always should be, and that the government has no role in trying to correct that concept. All right, and in the concept of fascism, they believe in superiority of state over the individual. So in this concept, individuality really means nothing. All right, and religion can play a huge role in political ideology. Religion is a very important concept, and it can play a large role in how society works and functions. And there are varying degrees to which a country deals with religion within its borders. Some countries, like the United States, have very strict separation of government power, and religious practice. And that's one of the things that we see in our First Amendment. We've got the Establishment Clause, and we have the Free Exercise Clause. So in the United States, the government can't enforce a state religion, and they can't stop you from practicing whatever religion you want to. Those are freedoms that exist within our country. In some countries, like the United Kingdom, they have official state religions but are very secularized. So even though you've got the Church of England, and that is the official religion, they still allow other religions to be practiced within the country, and the concept of discrimination within the state doesn't really exist. All right. Then you've got some countries like Iran, and these are theocracies, and theocracies require that religion permeate every part of society. So when they make laws, when they make policy, any type of thing that goes on within Iran, religion is a huge, huge concept of that. And then in some countries like China, China plays a role in trying to marginalize all religion, and they try and pretty much get rid of religion from their society completely. And that's the end of our discussion here. Thank you.